The air in the library smelled of dust and forgotten stories, a comforting scent that had always made me feel at home. Outside, autumn rain tapped against century-old windows, creating a rhythmic backdrop to the silence. I ran my fingers along leather-bound spines, feeling the texture beneath my fingertips, taking comfort in the familiar ritual that had defined my Friday evenings for the past year since moving to this small mountain town. "We're closing in 15 minutes, Ms. Ellis," called Mr. Winters from behind his ancient desk, his voice startling me from my reverie. "Of course, I'll be quick," I replied, tucking a strand of pale blonde hair behind my ear, a nervous habit I'd never been able to shake. I'd been searching for a specific book on local folklore for my thesis, something substantive about the myths that surrounded these mountains like morning mist. The locals spoke in hushed tones about creatures that roamed the dense forests beyond the town limits, tales that most attributed to superstition or tourist bait. But there was something in their eyes when they spoke, a flicker of genuine belief that had captured my academic curiosity. I stretched to reach a dusty volume on the top shelf, my fingertips just grazing its spine. The wooden stepladder looked precarious at best, but I needed that book. Just as I balanced on tiptoe, the library door swung open with unexpected force, the sudden gust of wind sending papers flying from Mr. Winter's desk. The distraction was enough. My foot slipped, and I felt myself falling backward. Instead of meeting the hard wooden floor, I crashed against something solid and warm. Strong hands steadied me, gripping my shoulders with surprising gentleness. The scent hit me immediately: pine needles, rain, and something wild I couldn't identify. "Careful," said a deep voice, the single word rippling through me like a stone dropped in still water. I turned to thank my rescuer and found myself looking up at a man I'd never seen before. In a town this small, strangers were noticeable, and this one, impossible to miss. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that curled slightly at the nape of his neck. His face was all sharp angles, as if carved from stone, but it was his eyes that held me captive. A dark, intense brown that seemed to look straight through me. "Thank you," I managed, suddenly aware of how close we were standing. "I didn't hear you come in. Few people do," he replied, his lips curving into what might have been a smile if it had reached his eyes. There was something guarded in his expression, a wariness that made me wonder what he was doing in our small library just before closing. "Ethan," called Mr. Winters, relief evident in his voice. "I wasn't expecting you until tomorrow." The stranger, Ethan, finally released my shoulders, taking a deliberate step back. "Change of plans," he said, his eyes still on me. "I need the records we discussed." Mr. Winters nodded, hurrying to unlock a cabinet behind his desk. Of course. This young lady is Eliza Ellis, our town's newest resident. She's doing research on local folklore for her graduate thesis." Ethan's expression changed almost imperceptibly. "Is that so?" he asked, his tone neutral but his posture suddenly rigid. "And what aspect of our folklore interests you, Ms. Ellis?" The way he emphasized folklore made my skin prickle, as if he were testing me somehow. I clutched my grandmother's silver pendant, a small crescent moon that had been passed down through generations of Ellis women. She'd given it to me on her deathbed, whispering that it would guide me through darkness. I'd always assumed it was the rambling of a mind clouded by illness, but the weight of the pendant against my collarbone had always brought me comfort. "The intersection of myth and reality," I answered honestly. "How stories shape communities and what truths might lie beneath them." Something flickered in his eyes, recognition, perhaps, or concern. "Some stones are better left unturned, Ms. Ellis. Not all knowledge is meant to be academic." Before I could respond, Mr. Winters returned with a leather folder which he handed to Ethan. "Here are the boundary records you requested. They date back to the original settlement." Ethan nodded his thanks but kept his attention on me. "How long have you been in Black River?" "Almost a year," I replied, suddenly defensive. "Long enough to know my way around." His laugh was unexpected, a low rumble that seemed to warm the air between us. "The town, perhaps, but the mountains? The forest? I doubt you've scratched the surface of what lies beyond the trails marked on tourist maps." I lifted my chin. "Perhaps I'd like to learn. Perhaps that would be unwise," he countered, his voice dropping to nearly a whisper, especially for someone who wanders alone. My cheeks flushed with heat. "Are you threatening me?" "Warning you," he clarified, his expression softening slightly. "There are things in these mountains that aren't covered in your academic texts, Eliza." The way he said my name, as if testing its weight on his tongue, sent an involuntary shiver down my spine. I found myself stepping closer to him, drawn by some pull I couldn't explain or resist. "Then maybe I need a guide," I said, surprising myself with my boldness. Something about this man both unsettled and intrigued me, like the moment before a thunderstorm when the air is charged with electricity. Mr. Winters cleared his throat. "I'm locking up now," he announced, keys jangling in his hand. "You both need to leave." Ethan stepped aside, gesturing for me to go ahead of him. As I passed, gathering my research notes and bag, my hand accidentally brushed against his. The contact lasted less than a second, but the effect was immediate and startling. His entire body tensed, and when I glanced up at his face, his eyes, previously dark brown, flashed a brilliant gold, luminous and otherworldly, before returning to normal so quickly I might have imagined it. He jerked away as if burned, his breath coming in a sharp hiss. Around us, the library lights flickered once, twice, then stabilized. "What?" I began, but he was already backing toward the door. "Stay away from the north woods, Eliza," he said, voice rough. "Especially when the moon is full." Then he was gone, the door swinging shut behind him with a heavy thud that echoed in the sudden silence. Mr. Winters clicked his tongue disapprovingly. "That family has always been odd," he muttered, more to himself than to me. "Been here since the town was founded but keep to themselves. Own half the mountain but you'd never know it." "Who is he?" I asked, still staring at the door. "Ethan Blackridge. His people have history here." He hesitated, then added, "If you're truly interested in our local myths, you might want to look into the Blackridge name. But I didn't tell you that." That night I couldn't sleep. Rain continued to drum against my bedroom window, but it wasn't the storm keeping me awake. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Ethan's face, those eyes flashing gold, impossible, and beautiful. I touched my grandmother's pendant, remembering her final words to me. "There are truths in this world that hide in plain sight, waiting for eyes willing to see them." I hadn't understood her then. Now I wondered if I was beginning to. Morning broke with unexpected sunshine, the storm having passed during the night. My small cottage sat at the edge of town, bordered by woods that stretched toward the mountains. I'd chosen it for its seclusion and charm, and its proximity to the wilderness I'd always been drawn to. Standing on my porch with coffee warming my hands, I gazed at the tree line where mist still clung to branches, creating ghostly shapes in the early light. "North woods," he had said. "Stay away when the moon is full." The full moon was tonight. I spent the morning in town, gathering supplies and information. The local cafe buzzed with conversation, but voices hushed when I approached. I'd grown used to being an outsider, but today the stares felt different, evaluating, concerned. "Heard you met Ethan Blackridge," said Mara, the cafe owner, as she refilled my coffee. Her tone was casual, but her eyes sharp. "At the library," I confirmed. "Do you know him?" She wiped her hands on her apron. "Everyone knows of the Blackridges. Doesn't mean we know them." She hesitated, then leaned closer. "Listen, honey. You seem nice, smart, but there are things about this place, boundaries that exist for good reasons. The Blackridges are one of them." "What does that mean?" I pressed. "It means some questions aren't meant to be answered," she replied, her smile not reaching her eyes, at least not by strangers. As I left the cafe, I noticed a flyer on the community board. "Full Moon Festival tonight. Join us for the monthly bonfire. Keep to town after dark. A monthly gathering on the full moon. To celebrate or to hide." I couldn't shake the feeling that the entire town was in on a secret I was just beginning to glimpse. By afternoon, I had made my decision. Academic curiosity or recklessness. I wasn't sure which was driving me as I packed my backpack with a flashlight, water, and my research notebook. The rational part of my mind insisted I was overreacting to coincidence and local superstition. But deeper instincts, the kind my grandmother had always told me to trust, whispered that there was truth waiting in those woods, truth that somehow involved Ethan Blackridge and his impossible golden eyes. As twilight approached, I watched from my window as townspeople gathered in the square, carrying food and firewood for the festival. Music drifted through the air, a counterpoint to the howl of wind in the trees. The moon would rise soon, full and bright above the mountains. I touched my pendant once more, drawing courage from its familiar weight, and stepped into the gathering darkness. Instead of heading toward the festival lights, I turned north, toward the forbidden woods, and whatever secrets they held beneath the rising full moon. The forest welcomed me with whispers, leaves rustling, branches creaking, creatures scurrying unseen in the underbrush. Twilight painted everything in shades of blue and purple, the familiar landscape transforming into something ancient and unknowable, with each step I took away from town. Behind me, the festival sounds grew fainter, laughter and music replaced by the symphony of night creatures awakening. I followed a narrow trail, barely visible in the deepening darkness. My flashlight bobbed ahead of me, the beam catching on low-hanging branches and exposed roots that seemed to reach for my ankles. The rational part of my mind, the academic, the researcher, kept insisting this was foolish, potentially dangerous, but another part, something deeper and more instinctive, urged me forward. "You're looking for answers," I whispered to myself, the sound of my voice startling in the quiet. This is just field research, but the weight of my grandmother's pendant against my skin reminded me that this was more than academic curiosity. Something had called me to this town a year ago, the same something that now drew me into these woods on a full moon night, after a strange man with golden eyes had explicitly warned me away. The path grew steeper, winding upward into the mountains. I paused to catch my breath, leaning against the rough bark of an ancient pine. When I looked up through gaps in the canopy, I could see the sky darkening from indigo to black, stars emerging like scattered diamonds. The moon would rise soon. A twig snapped somewhere to my left, a sharp, deliberate sound that didn't belong to the wind or small creatures. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. "Hello?" I called, immediately regretting breaking the silence. "Is someone there?" Nothing answered but the wind, yet I couldn't shake the sensation of being watched. I switched off my flashlight, letting my eyes adjust to the darkness. The forest seemed to hold its breath around me. When I finally spotted it, my heart nearly stopped, a pair of eyes reflecting the last of the twilight, watching me from between the trees. Not human eyes. They were set too low to the ground, too wide apart. Animal eyes. "Easy," I murmured, slowly reaching for my flashlight again. "I'm just passing through." The eyes blinked once, twice, then disappeared. I exhaled shakily, switching the light back on with trembling fingers. Whatever it was had gone, or was simply hiding now, waiting. I pressed on, climbing higher into the mountains. The trail grew less defined, eventually disappearing altogether beneath a carpet of pine needles. I checked my phone. No signal, as expected. The GPS map I'd downloaded showed I was approaching a clearing marked only as Black Ridge Land, private property. The trees thinned suddenly, and I found myself at the edge of a wide meadow bathed in silvery light. The moon had risen, huge and impossibly bright, illuminating the grass that rippled like water in the night breeze. In the center of the clearing stood a stone structure. Not quite a house, more like a temple or shrine, ancient and weathered. It seemed to grow from the earth itself, its walls covered in creeping vines and moss. I approached cautiously, my footsteps muffled by the thick grass. As I drew closer, I could make out symbols carved into the stone. Spirals, crescents, and what looked like paw prints arranged in patterns that seemed almost like writing. Some of the symbols matched the engravings on my grandmother's pendant, and I touched it reflexively, feeling its silver grow warm against my skin. A rough circle of standing stones surrounded the central structure, each twice my height and covered in similar markings. The air felt different here, charged, like the moment before lightning strikes. "You shouldn't be here." I whirled around, nearly losing my balance. Ethan Blackridge stood at the edge of the clearing, his tall figure silhouetted against the trees. Even in shadow, I could feel the intensity of his gaze. "This is private property," he continued, walking toward me with measured steps. In the moonlight, He looked different. Wilder somehow. His movements fluid and predatory. I warned you about the North Woods. I'm researching local folklore, I said, lifting my chin despite the fear fluttering in my chest. These symbols, they appear in several texts about this region's original settlers. He stopped a few feet away, close enough that I could see the tension in his jaw, the careful control in his posture. This isn't about your research, Eliza. You know that, and I did know, somehow. This pull, this connection, it went beyond academic interest. What happened yesterday? I said quietly. Your eyes. A trick of the light, he replied too quickly, his gaze dropping to my pendant. Something like recognition flashed across his face. Where did you get that? I clutched the silver crescent. My grandmother. It's been in my family for generations. The Ellis family, he said, making it sound like a revelation. I should have known when I heard your name. Known what? He shook his head, looking torn between anger and some other emotion I couldn't identify. You need to leave. Now. It isn't safe for you here. Because of the full moon? I asked, taking a step closer to him. What are you afraid I'll see, Ethan? His laugh was harsh, without humor. You have no idea what you're dealing with. This isn't some quaint local legend for your thesis. This is my life, my family's legacy. Then help me understand, I pleaded, reaching out instinctively. He backed away from my touch. You want understanding? Look around you. This place has been sacred to my people for centuries. Those symbols you're so interested in. They tell our story, how we came to be, what we are. And what is that exactly? I pressed. The moonlight caught his face as he looked up at the night sky, illuminating features that seemed to sharpen before my eyes. Guardians, he said finally. Protectors of these mountains and everyone in them, including stubborn researchers who don't heed warnings. A howl split the night, long, mournful, and much too close. Ethan's head snapped toward the sound, his entire body tensing. They're coming, he muttered, grabbing my arm. We need to get you out of here. Who's coming? I demanded. But he was already pulling me toward the trees. My family, he said grimly. And they're not as patient as I am. We ran through the forest, his grip firm but gentle on my wrist as he guided me over fallen logs and around dense thickets. He moved with impossible grace in the darkness, never stumbling, never hesitating. I struggled to keep up, branches whipping at my face, roots catching at my feet. More howls rose in the night, coming from different directions now, surrounding us. They're hurting us, I gasped, the realization hitting me with sudden clarity. Ethan shot me a surprised look over his shoulder. Yes, he confirmed. Back toward their territory. Why? He slowed slightly, allowing me to catch my breath. Because you're wearing that pendant, he said, nodding toward my grandmother's silver crescent. It marks you as significant. Before I could ask what he meant, a massive shape burst from the undergrowth ahead. A wolf, larger than any I'd ever seen or imagined possible. Its fur was silver in the moonlight, its eyes gleaming with intelligence as it blocked our path. I stumbled backward, but Ethan stepped in front of me, his posture both protective and deferential as he faced the creature. Mother, he said, his voice steady. She doesn't know. She's not a threat. The wolf, Ethan had called it Mother, tilted its head, studying me with eyes that seemed too aware, too human. It sniffed the air between us, then fixed its gaze on my pendant. Please, I whispered, though I wasn't sure if I was addressing Ethan or the wolf. Slowly, deliberately, the wolf stepped aside, clearing our path. But as we moved to pass, another howl echoed through the trees, different from the others, filled with urgency and what sounded almost like pain. Ethan stiffened. Daniel, he said, voice tight with sudden concern. Then to me, my brother. Something's wrong. The silver wolf, his mother, was already moving, a streak of moonlight disappearing into the trees toward the sound. Ethan looked torn, his gaze darting between me and the direction his mother had gone. Go, I said, understanding his conflict. If your brother needs help, I can't leave you alone out here, he interrupted. It's not just my family in these woods tonight. Another howl, more desperate than the first. Ethan cursed under his breath. Come with me, he said finally, his eyes meeting mine. But stay close, and no matter what you see, don't run. Running triggers the hunt response. The words sent ice through my veins, but I nodded. Whatever was happening, whatever Ethan and his family were, I was already too deep in this mystery to turn back now. We moved swiftly through the forest, following the sound of howls that grew more frequent and urgent. The trees opened suddenly onto another clearing, smaller than the one with the stone circle. In the center, the silver wolf stood over a dark shape on the ground. Another wolf, this one with russet fur matted with something darker, glistening in the moonlight. Daniel, Ethan breathed, rushing forward. I hung back at the edge of the trees, watching as he knelt beside the injured wolf. The silver one, his mother, paced anxiously, making soft whining sounds. What happened? Ethan asked, his hands moving carefully over the russet wolf's body. It was surreal, watching him speak to these creatures as if expecting answers. More surprising was when answers came. Not in words, but in a series of growls and movements that Ethan seemed to understand perfectly. Hunters, he spat, the word like venom, with silver bullets. They're getting bolder. The injured wolf tried to rise but collapsed again with a whimper that wrenched at my heart. Whatever else these creatures might be, they were suffering, afraid. Without thinking, I stepped into the clearing. The silver wolf's head snapped up, eyes locking onto mine with a warning growl. She's with me, Ethan said quickly, then looked at me with a mixture of surprise and wariness. Eliza, you should wait in the trees. I want to help, I said, approaching slowly, hands visible at my sides. I have first aid training. The absurdity of offering human first aid to a creature that might not be entirely animal wasn't lost on me, but I continued forward, drawn by some instinct I couldn't explain. The russet wolf, Daniel, watched me approach, intelligent eyes filled with pain and suspicion. As I knelt beside him, opposite Ethan, I could see the wound now, a bullet hole in his shoulder, the surrounding fur singed and bloody. Silver burns them, Ethan explained quietly, seeing my confusion. The bullet needs to be removed before he can heal. I swallowed hard, my academic theories and half-formed suspicions coalescing into certainty. He's a werewolf, I whispered. You all are. Ethan's eyes met mine across his injured brother, no longer bothering to hide the golden glow that had startled me in the library. Yes, he said simply. And now you're in the middle of our war. The silver wolf, Ethan's mother, made a sharp noise that sounded distinctly like disagreement. Not yet, Ethan amended, still holding my gaze. But she will be, after tonight. He glanced down at my pendant. Her family always has been. She just didn't know it. The russet wolf whined again, more urgently. Ethan refocused on the wound. I need to get the bullet out, but I don't have the right tools here. We need to get him somewhere safe, I said, mind racing. My cottage. It's closer than going deeper into the mountains, isn't it? Ethan looked surprised at my offer, then thoughtful. Yes, but are you sure? I wasn't sure of anything except that I couldn't walk away from this, from them, now. Yes, I said firmly. We need to hurry. As if understanding my words, the russet wolf struggled to his feet, leaning heavily against Ethan's side. The silver wolf, Ethan's mother, approached me slowly, her massive head level with my chest. Up close, I could see flecks of gold in her amber eyes, the same shade Ethan's turned when what? When he felt strong emotion, when he touched me? She sniffed at my pendant, then pressed her muzzle gently against my hand. Acceptance, permission, gratitude. I wasn't sure which, but the gesture filled me with unexpected warmth. She likes you, Ethan said, sounding both surprised and resigned. That's unusual. I'm an unusual person, I replied, the beginnings of a smile tugging at my lips despite the gravity of the situation. His answering smile was brief but genuine. That, he said, is becoming increasingly clear. Together, we began the careful journey back toward town, toward my cottage, the injured wolf between us and the silver one leading the way. Above us, the full moon watched our slow progress through the trees, its light both blessing and curse to the creatures now under my protection. The journey back to my cottage felt endless, each step measured by Daniel's pained breathing and the constant vigilance of the silver wolf, Ethan's mother, who scouted ahead and circled back, guarding our slow progress. The forest had transformed into a different world entirely. What had been mysterious and alluring on my journey now felt dangerous, filled with shadows that could hide those hunters Ethan had mentioned. Who would hunt werewolves? I asked quietly as we navigated a steep incline, supporting Daniel between us. The russet wolf was massive, his weight against my side both terrifying and strangely comforting. I thought you were just legends. Ethan's laugh was bitter. Legends are often just truths wrapped in fear, he said. There have always been those who hunt what they don't understand. My family has protected these mountains for generations, but there are rival packs, hunters who believe we're abominations, humans who discovered our existence and want our power for themselves. And the town? I pressed. The festival tonight? A tradition born from necessity. The townspeople know enough to stay inside during full moons, make noise to keep us away from their homes. Most don't know exactly what we are, just that their safety depends on respecting boundaries. He glanced at me. Until people like you start asking questions. I bristled at his tone. I didn't ask for this, didn't you? His golden eyes flicked to my pendant. The Ellis women have been drawn to our kind for centuries. Your grandmother knew exactly what she was passing down to you. The revelation struck me silent. Had my grandmother known? Had she deliberately sent me into this world of moonlight and fangs with nothing but a silver pendant as protection? The more I considered it, the more certain memories resurfaced. Her stories about the mountains, her warnings about full moons, the way she'd smile secretively when speaking of old friends in a town I'd never visited until after her death. We emerged from the forest behind my cottage, the small structure dark and peaceful against the night sky. The silver wolf hesitated at the tree line, clearly reluctant to approach human dwellings. She won't come closer, Ethan explained. Too many scents, too exposed. She'll keep watch from here. I nodded, understanding the wolf's caution even as I marveled at her obvious intelligence. As if sensing my thoughts, she met my gaze one last time before melting back into the shadows of the forest. Getting Daniel inside was a challenge. The russet wolf was weakening, his breathing labored, dark blood matting his beautiful fur. Once inside, I quickly closed all the curtains and bolted the door. The bathroom, I directed, helping Ethan guide his brother down the narrow hallway. There's better light, and it's easier to clean. Daniel collapsed onto the bathroom tile, a pained whine escaping him as Ethan knelt beside him. I gathered first aid supplies, my mind racing through what little I knew of treating gunshot wounds, none of which involved werewolves or silver bullets. I need to see the wound better, I said, setting down my supplies and reaching for a pair of scissors. May I? Ethan nodded, and I carefully cut away the fur around the wound. The damage was worse than I'd initially thought. The skin around the entry point was blackened and blistered, as if burned. The silver, Ethan explained, seeing my horrified expression. It's poison to us. The longer it stays in, the more damage it does. I took a deep breath, steadying my hands. I need tweezers, something to extract the bullet. As I searched through my supplies, Daniel made a strange, choked sound. When I turned back, I gasped. The russet fur was receding, limbs elongating, transforming before my eyes into a young man who looked strikingly similar to Ethan, though perhaps a few years younger. He's shifting, Ethan explained, supporting his brother's now human shoulders. The pain? Sometimes it triggers the change. Daniel's eyes fluttered open, human eyes now, dark brown clouded with pain. Who's she? He rasped, looking at me with suspicion. Eliza Ellis, Ethan answered, his tone conveying something significant. Recognition flickered in Daniel's eyes. Ellis, he repeated. Like the treaty? Before I could ask what treaty, Daniel groaned, his back arching as another wave of pain hit him. The bullet wound looked even more grotesque against human skin, a perfect circular hole surrounded by veins that had turned black, spreading like poison through his shoulder. Hold him, I instructed, my training taking over as I approached with sterilized tweezers. This will hurt. Ethan braced his brother's shoulders while I probed the wound, searching for the bullet. Daniel's entire body went rigid, a strangled cry escaping through clenched teeth. After what felt like an eternity, my tweezers connected with something solid. Got it, I murmured, carefully extracting the small silver bullet. It gleamed in the bathroom light, deceptively beautiful for something so deadly. The effect was immediate. Daniel's body relaxed, his breathing eased, and, most incredibly, the blackened veins began to recede before my eyes. Werewolf healing, Ethan explained, seeing my amazement. Now that the silver's out, his body can repair itself. I bandaged the wound anyway, more for my own peace of mind than Daniel's benefit. As I worked, I felt Ethan watching me with an intensity that made my skin tingle. "You're taking this remarkably well," he observed. I secured the bandage with medical tape, buying time to consider my response. "I've spent a year researching legends that I'm now discovering are true. I just pulled a silver bullet from a werewolf in my bathroom. Well, isn't exactly how I'd describe what I'm feeling." I met his gaze. "But running screaming into the night wouldn't help anyone, would it?" His lips curved into the first genuine smile I'd seen from him. "No, I suppose not." Daniel's eyes had closed, his breathing steadier now. The color was returning to his face, the pain lines smoothing out. "He needs rest," Ethan said, gathering his brother in his arms with surprising ease. "Is there somewhere—" "The bedroom," I directed, leading the way. "He can take my bed." As Ethan settled Daniel onto my bed, I caught myself observing the differences between the brothers. Where Daniel was all sharp edges and intensity even in unconsciousness, Ethan moved with a contained power that spoke of greater control, greater responsibility. The alpha and his lieutenant, I thought, then wondered where such knowledge had come from. "Will you stay with him?" I asked. "I'll make some tea." In the kitchen, I braced myself against the counter, finally allowing the trembling to overtake my limbs. Werewolves. Actual werewolves. My academic research had led me straight into the supernatural world I'd only theorized about. And my grandmother had known, had somehow been part of it, had prepared me with her pendant and her cryptic warnings. The kettle whistled, startling me from my thoughts. As I prepared 2 mugs of tea, I heard quiet footsteps behind me. "He's sleeping," Ethan said, his voice low. "The wound is already half healed." I handed him a mug, our fingers brushing in the exchange. This time, when his eyes flashed gold, I didn't flinch away. "Why does that happen?" I asked, nodding toward his eyes. "When we touch." He looked down at his tea, as if the answer might be found in its depths. "It's complicated. I just performed amateur surgery on your werewolf brother," I pointed out. "I think we're past complicated." His soft laugh surprised me. "Fair point." He set down his mug, running a hand through his dark hair. "Your pendant, the silver crescent, it's not just jewelry. It's a symbol of the treaty between our families." "What treaty?" "Centuries ago, these mountains were contested territory between my ancestors and a rival pack. The conflict nearly destroyed both sides until a human woman intervened, an Ellis. She brokered peace, protected our secrets from other humans, became what we call a pack friend, a human ally." He nodded toward my pendant. "That symbol marks her descendants as under our protection and worthy of our trust." I touched the silver crescent, seeing it with new eyes. So my grandmother must have been the last Ellis to maintain contact with the pack. When she passed, we lost track of her line until you arrived in town. His expression turned thoughtful. "We wondered why a young academic would choose our obscure town for folklore research. Now it makes sense. But it doesn't explain why your eyes change when we touch," I pressed. Ethan hesitated, and I could see him weighing how much to reveal. "Pack friends have a particular resonance with werewolves, a connection. It's rare, especially now, but when it happens..." He trailed off, looking uncomfortable. "Is it dangerous?" I asked. "Not dangerous, no." His gaze finally met mine, gold flickering at the edges of his irises. "But significant." Before I could ask what significant meant, a sound from outside caught our attention. A long, warning howl that made Ethan tense immediately. "My mother," he said, already moving toward the door. "Something's wrong." I followed him onto the small porch. The full moon illuminated my yard and the forest beyond, where shadows moved between trees. Too large for normal wolves, too purposeful. "More hunters?" I asked, fear constricting my throat. Ethan's expression was grim. "Yes, and they're closing in. They must have followed our trail from the clearing." He turned to me, his face hard with decision. "Stay here with Daniel. Lock the doors. Don't let anyone in except me or my mother." "What are you going to do?" His answer was to strip off his shirt in one fluid motion. My breath caught at the sight of his muscled torso, covered in intricate tattoos that seemed to shift in the moonlight. "Protect what's mine," he said, his voice deepening to something near a growl. Then, meeting my eyes one last time, "That includes you now, Eliza Ellis, whether either of us planned it or not." Before I could respond, his body began to change, bones cracking, muscles shifting, dark fur sprouting across his skin. The transformation was both beautiful and terrifying, his human features elongating into a powerful muzzle, his hands curving into deadly claws. Where Ethan had stood, a massive black wolf now gazed at me with familiar golden eyes. For a heartbeat, we simply looked at each other, human and wolf, yet somehow connected by something ancient and unspoken. Then he turned and bounded into the forest, a shadow among shadows, leaving me alone on the porch with the sound of distant howls and the knowledge that nothing in my life would ever be the same again. I stood frozen on the porch, watching the spot where Ethan had disappeared into the tree line. The night air carried sounds of distant conflict. Growls, shouts, the crack of what could only be gunfire. My heart hammered against my ribs as I realized what was happening. Ethan and his mother were fighting the hunters, protecting us, protecting me. Self-preservation urged me back inside. I locked the door, checking windows and drawing curtains as I moved through the cottage. In the bedroom, Daniel stirred restlessly, his face flushed with fever despite the werewolf healing Ethan had mentioned. "Water," he rasped when he saw me in the doorway, struggling to sit up. I brought him a glass, helping him drink. His skin burned beneath my touch, and the bandage on his shoulder was soaked through with something darker than blood, a black ichor that seemed to pulse with each labored beat of his heart. "Something's wrong," I said, peeling back the edge of the bandage to reveal the wound. Though smaller than before, the edges were still blackened, veins of darkness spreading outward. "It's not healing properly." Daniel's laugh was bitter. "Silver poisoning," he managed. "The bullet must have fragmented." Fear twisted in my stomach. "There are still pieces inside you?" He nodded weakly. "Can feel them. Burning." I needed to help him. But how? My limited first aid knowledge was useless against supernatural silver poisoning. Then I remembered my research. Months of collecting local folklore, herbal remedies, old wives' tales about creatures of the night. If even half of what I'd documented was true. "Hold on," I told Daniel, squeezing his hand. "I think I know something that might help." In my study, I pulled out notebooks filled with interviews from local elders, stories passed down through generations. I flipped frantically through pages until I found what I was looking for. Notes from a conversation with old Martha, a reclusive herbalist who lived on the mountain's eastern slope. "Wolfsbane to harm, moonflower to heal," I read aloud. Martha had spoken of creatures she called the mountain folk, describing concoctions that could either poison or cure them. At the time, I'd categorized it as interesting superstition. Now, it seemed like survival information. I grabbed my coat and a flashlight, hesitating at the front door. Ethan had told me to stay inside, but Daniel was getting worse. The moonflowers Martha had described grew in my garden. I'd planted them for their beauty, never suspecting their potential power. The sounds of conflict had moved deeper into the forest. I took a deep breath, unlocked the door, and stepped outside, scanning the shadows. Nothing moved in my small yard as I hurried to the garden patch beside the porch, where pale flowers glowed like fallen stars in the moonlight. I gathered several blooms, their sweet scent filling my nostrils as I hurried back inside, locking the door behind me. In the kitchen, I crushed the flowers in a mortar, following Martha's instructions from memory. Bruise the petals under moonlight, add spring water, speak the healer's prayer. I had no idea what the prayer might be, but as I worked, words rose unbidden to my lips. Not English, but something older that felt right on my tongue, as if remembered from another life. The mixture began to glow faintly, illuminating my hands with soft blue light. I carried the bowl to Daniel's bedside, where his condition had deteriorated further, his breathing shallow, skin ashen beneath his tan. "Drink," I urged, lifting his head to help him. He hesitated, nostrils flaring at the scent. "Where did you learn this?" he asked, voice barely a whisper. "I don't know," I admitted. "It just came to me." His dark eyes studied my face for a moment before he accepted the bowl, draining its contents in several desperate gulps. The effect was almost immediate. Color returned to his face, his breathing deepened, and the black veins around his wound began to recede. "Ellis magic," he murmured, a hint of wonder in his voice as his eyelids grew heavy. "They said your family had it, but I didn't believe." Before I could question him further, he drifted into a healing sleep, his face peaceful now, rather than pain-ridden. I sat beside him, relief washing through me in dizzying waves. What had I just done? What was Ellis magic, and how had I known that ancient prayer? The questions swirled in my mind, but answers would have to wait. A sudden crash from the front of the cottage snapped me back to the present danger. Someone, or something, was trying to break in. I grabbed the nearest weapon, a heavy brass lamp, and moved silently into the hallway. Through the living room window, I could see dark figures moving across my yard, flashlight beams sweeping the ground. "They went this way," a gruff voice called. "There's blood on these steps. Hunters." They'd followed our trail to my cottage. I backed away from the window, mind racing. Daniel was healing but still vulnerable, and Ethan was somewhere in the forest, possibly injured or fighting other hunters. I was alone with no real defenses against armed men, no defenses except I touched my pendant, feeling it warm against my skin. "Ellis magic," Daniel had said. My grandmother's cryptic final words echoed in my mind. There are truths in this world that hide in plain sight, waiting for eyes willing to see them. The pendant seemed to pulse beneath my fingers, its warmth spreading up my arm and through my body. Knowledge unfurled in my mind, not like remembering, but like awakening to something that had always been there, dormant until needed. I moved to the front door, no longer afraid but filled with a strange, calm certainty. As the hunters approached my porch, I threw the door open, standing framed in the doorway with my pendant held before me like a shield. "This land is protected," I said, my voice stronger and deeper than I'd ever heard it. "By ancient pact and bloodline oath, I deny you entry." The hunters, 3 men in dark clothing, armed with rifles, froze on my lawn, clearly startled by my appearance. Their leader, a weathered man with cold eyes, recovered quickly. "Stand aside, girl," he ordered. "We're tracking dangerous animals that fled this way." "There are no animals here," I replied evenly. "Only a broken treaty, and men who should know better than to hunt on protected ground." Something flickered in the leader's eyes. Recognition, perhaps, or superstitious fear, his gaze fixed on my pendant. "Ellis," he said, the name both curse and acknowledgement. "We thought your line had ended. You thought wrong," I countered, the pendant growing warmer in my palm. "Leave now, while I still permit it." The younger men shifted uncomfortably, exchanging uncertain glances, but the leader stood his ground. "Your family may have protected those beasts in the past, but times have changed. We know what they are, what threat they pose. Step aside, or we'll consider you as much an enemy as they are." He raised his rifle, aiming not at me but past me, into the cottage where Daniel lay vulnerable. I felt something surge within me. Anger, yes, but also power. Flowing from the pendant and through my veins like liquid moonlight. "I warned you," I said softly. I didn't consciously know what I was doing, but my body moved with instinctive precision, my free hand tracing symbols in the air while words of power spilled from my lips. The pendant flared with silver light, and suddenly the air between us and the hunters shimmered like a heat mirage. "What the hell?" one of the younger men exclaimed, backing away. The leader fired his rifle. The bullet hit the shimmering air and dropped harmlessly to the ground, its momentum stolen by whatever barrier I'd created. "Witch!" he spat, genuine fear replacing his earlier confidence. "Protector," I corrected. "As my grandmother was, and her grandmother before her, the Blackridges are under my family's protection by ancient pact. Leave these mountains tonight, or face consequences your silver bullets can't shield you from." I had no idea if I could actually deliver on that threat, but the pendant pulsed reassuringly against my palm, and the barrier between us held steady. The younger hunters were already retreating toward the trees, their earlier bloodlust replaced by primitive fear of powers they didn't understand. The leader held his ground a moment longer, hatred burning in his eyes. "This isn't over, Ellis," he promised. "There's a war coming that your old magics can't stop." "Perhaps," I acknowledged, "but it won't be fought tonight, and not on my land." After a tense standoff, he finally backed away, following his men into the darkness. I maintained the barrier until I was certain they were gone, then sagged against the doorframe, suddenly exhausted. The pendant cooled against my skin, and the shimmering air dissipated like morning mist. I locked the door with trembling hands and returned to Daniel's side. He was sleeping peacefully, the black veins completely gone from his wound, which now looked like it was days rather than hours old. Whatever I'd done with the moonflowers had worked. Settling into a chair beside the bed, I tried to process everything that had happened. Werewolves were real. My family had some kind of magical connection to them. I'd apparently just performed 2 different kinds of magic I never knew I possessed. And somewhere in the forest, Ethan was fighting to protect us all. I must have dozed off despite my racing thoughts, because I awoke to gentle pressure on my shoulder. Moonlight streamed through the bedroom window, illuminating Ethan's face as he crouched beside my chair. He was human again, dressed in what looked like borrowed clothes, his face scratched and bruised, but his eyes, warm brown now, not gold, filled with concern. "You're safe," I murmured, relief flooding through me. His smile was tired but genuine. "I should be saying that to you." His gaze moved to his brother, who slept soundly, then back to me. "Daniel's healing well, better than he should be, given the silver poisoning. I used moonflowers," I explained, watching his expression carefully. The pendant helped me." Understanding dawned in his eyes. "Ellis magic," he said softly. "Your grandmother was a powerful ally to our pack. It seems her gifts didn't end with her." "The hunters came here," I continued. 3 men. I sent them away." His eyebrows rose. "Sent them away?" "I created some kind of barrier. The pendant showed me how." I touched the silver crescent, cool now against my skin. It was like remembering something I never knew I'd forgotten. Ethan nodded slowly. "The old stories say the first Ellis woman was a powerful witch who fell in love with a werewolf. Their union created a bloodline with unique gifts, human, but with the ability to channel moon energy the way we do when we shift." His hand covered mine where it rested on the pendant. "You're remembering your inheritance, Eliza. Your birthright." His touch was warm, and this time when his eyes flashed gold, I felt an answering warmth inside me, as if something within recognized and responded to his nature. "What does it mean?" I asked quietly. "This connection between us?" Instead of answering, he leaned forward slowly, giving me time to pull away if I wished. When I didn't, his lips met mine in a kiss that felt like coming home. Gentle at first, then deepening as that strange connection between us flared to life, filling me with warmth and certainty. When we finally broke apart, his eyes were fully gold, luminous in the darkened room. My pendant glowed with answering light, creating a circle of silver radiance that enveloped us both. "It means," he said softly, "that the old alliance has been renewed, and that neither of us will ever be alone again." Dawn broke over the mountains, painting my small bedroom in shades of gold and amber. I stood by the window, watching the last stars fade from the sky, as the full moon sank behind the western peaks. Behind me, Daniel slept soundly, his body having repaired most of the damage from the silver bullet. Ethan had left an hour earlier to check the perimeter and connect with other pack members, promising to return before noon. In the gentle morning light, Last night's events seemed almost dreamlike. Werewolves and magic, ancient packs and silver bullets. Yet the evidence surrounded me. Daniel's nearly healed wound, the crushed moonflowers in my kitchen, the pendant that still hummed with subtle energy against my skin. And most convincingly, the memory of Ethan's kiss, which had awakened something within me that felt both entirely new and achingly familiar. I made coffee and carried my mug to the porch, where dew sparkled on the grass, and early birdsong replaced last night's howls. The forest looked peaceful now, showing no signs of the violent confrontation that had occurred beneath its canopy. I wondered how many mornings my grandmother had spent just like this, watching the sunrise while holding secrets the ordinary world would never understand. A twig snapped at the edge of the yard, and I tensed before recognizing the elegant figure emerging from the trees. It wasn't Ethan, but a striking woman with silver-streaked dark hair and piercing amber eyes. The same eyes I'd seen on the silver wolf, Ethan's mother. She approached cautiously, her movements fluid and graceful even in human form. "Eliza Ellis," she said, her voice musical and slightly accented. "At last we meet properly. I am Celine Blackridge." I inclined my head respectfully. "Would you like some coffee, Mrs. Blackridge?" A smile touched her lips. "Celine, please. And yes, coffee would be welcome after a long night." I brought a second mug, and we sat together on the porch steps, a companionable silence stretching between us as we watched the sunrise. There was something comforting in her presence, a quiet strength that reminded me of my grandmother. "Daniel is healing well," I said finally. "The silver poisoning has receded." She nodded, her expression softening. "Yes, I sensed it. You used the old magic. I'm not sure I understand what happened," I admitted. "It was like muscle memory for something I've never actually done." "Ellis women have always had the gift," Selene explained. "It flows in your bloodline just as our nature flows in ours. Your grandmother was particularly powerful. She helped our pack through many difficult times. She studied me over the rim of her mug. She would be proud to see you stepping into your inheritance. She never told me," I said, unable to keep the hint of accusation from my voice. "Any of it." Celine's smile was sad. "Marion believed she was protecting you by keeping you away from our world. There was conflict when you were very young. Hunters targeted our pack, and several humans connected to us were caught in the crossfire." "My parents," I whispered, sudden understanding dawning. My parents had died in what I'd always been told was a hiking accident when I was just 3 years old. "They were killed because of their connection to your family." "Yes," Celine acknowledged quietly. "Your grandmother took you away, severed ties with us to keep you safe. It was the right decision at the time, though it broke her heart. She loved our family as her own." The revelation settled over me like a physical weight. My entire life had been shaped by this connection I never knew existed. My orphaned childhood, my grandmother's cryptic stories, even my academic interest in folklore and myth. It hadn't been random chance that led me to this town after her death. It had been the pull of blood and magic calling me home. "And now the hunters are back," I said, remembering the man's ominous words, "A war is coming." Celine's expression hardened. "They never truly left. But yes, they've grown bolder, more organized. Last night was the first time they've dared to come so deep into our territory." Her eyes met mine. "Your arrival has shifted the balance, Eliza. Your presence here, the reawakening of Ellis magic, it changes things. For better or worse, that remains to be seen." She set down her empty mug. "But I believe your grandmother sent you back to us for a reason. Marion always saw further than most." Before I could question her further, Daniel appeared in the doorway, looking remarkably recovered despite the events of the previous night. He leaned against the frame, his resemblance to Ethan even more striking in daylight. "Morning," he said, voice still rough with sleep. "Got any coffee for the guy you saved last night?" Celine rose gracefully and embraced her younger son, murmuring something in a language I didn't recognize. The tender gesture humanized her in a way that made my throat tighten. Werewolf or not, she was a mother who had nearly lost her child. As I went to fetch more coffee, I heard the familiar rumble of Ethan's voice approaching. He appeared from the tree line, deep in conversation with a tall, silver-haired man whose commanding presence identified him immediately. This could only be Ethan's father, the pack leader, the alpha. They fell silent as they approached the porch, the older man's gaze fixing on me with an intensity that made me straighten my spine instinctively. "So, you're Marion's granddaughter," he said, his voice a deep bass that seemed to vibrate in the air. "I see her in your eyes. This is my father, Alaric Blackridge," Ethan introduced. Coming to stand beside me in what felt like a protective gesture, I extended my hand. "It's an honor to meet you, Mr. Blackridge." Instead of shaking it, he clasped my forearm in what I somehow knew was a traditional pack greeting. "The honor is mine, Eliza Ellis. Your family's debt to our pack was paid generations ago, yet still you come to our aid." He inclined his head toward Daniel. "My son would have died without your intervention." "Anyone would have helped," I said automatically. Alaric's laugh was a rumble like distant thunder. "No, child. Most humans would have run screaming into the night at the first sight of transformation. Instead, you performed magic you didn't know you possessed and faced down armed hunters." His expression grew serious. "You have your grandmother's courage." We moved inside as the morning brightened, the small cottage feeling suddenly crowded with the Blackridge family gathered in my living room. They discussed last night's events in low, urgent voices. How many hunters they'd encountered, where they might have come from, what their presence might signify. I busied myself in the kitchen, preparing breakfast while trying to process everything I'd learned. My mind kept returning to Ethan's kiss, to the golden light in his eyes, to Celine's words about my arrival shifting the balance. I had come to this town seeking folklore for my thesis. Instead, I had found my own legacy, woven through with magic and ancient packs. Ethan appeared in the doorway, watching me crack eggs into a bowl with methodical precision. "You're taking all this remarkably well," he observed for the second time in 24 hours. I laughed softly. "I'm compartmentalizing. I'll probably have a complete breakdown once you all leave." He crossed the kitchen in 2 strides, gently taking the eggs from my hands and setting them aside. "What if I don't want to leave?" My heart stuttered in my chest. "What do you mean?" "Last night, when we kissed..." He hesitated, searching my face. "You felt it, didn't you? The connection between us. It's rare, Eliza. Sacred." "Because I'm an Ellis?" I asked, needing to understand. "Because of the pact between our families?" "No." He took my hands in his, and I felt that familiar warmth spreading up my arms. "The pact may have brought our families together initially, but what's between us is something different, something deeper." His thumbs traced circles on my wrists, sending shivers through me. "We call it the soul bond. It can only happen between true mates." "Mates?" I echoed, the word simultaneously foreign and thrilling. "In pack terms, it means everything," he explained, his eyes beginning to shimmer gold. "Partner, protector, equal. It's the rarest kind of bond, one that transcends bloodlines and even species. My parents have it. I never thought I would find it, especially not with a human," I supplied when he trailed off. His smile was gentle. "A remarkable human with magic in her veins and courage in her heart." His hand rose to cut my cheek. "I've known since the moment you touched me in the library. My wolf recognized you instantly, even if I resisted the knowledge." "Is that why your eyes changed?" He nodded. "The wolf is always closer to the surface with strong emotion, but with you, it responds to your essence, your energy. It wants to be known by you." I leaned into his touch, my body instinctively seeking closer connection. "And what do you want, Ethan Blackridge?" "You," he said simply. "However you'll have me, for as long as you'll have me." The honesty in his voice broke something open inside me, a wall I hadn't even realized I'd built around my heart. Always the serious academic, the dedicated researcher, keeping emotional entanglements at arm's length. But with Ethan, those defenses crumbled like sandcastles against the tide. "I don't know what any of this means," I admitted. "The magic, the pack, being a mate, it's all new territory. We can learn together," he promised. "One day at a time." From the living room came the sound of cleared throats and poorly disguised chuckles. Ethan winced, stepping back slightly. "I forgot about werewolf hearing," he muttered. Great, I sighed. So your entire family just heard that conversation? Every word, he confirmed with a rueful smile. Privacy is a rare commodity in pack life. Something else to consider before you decide if this is what you want. I thought about it for all of 3 seconds before reaching up to pull him down for another kiss, not caring about our audience. This kiss was different from our first. Less hesitant, more certain. The pendant warmed between us, and I felt that strange power stirring again, responding to his touch, to his nature. When we broke apart, his eyes were fully gold, beautiful, and wild. I'll take that as a yes, he murmured. It's a yes, I confirmed, my voice steady with newfound certainty. I still have 1,000 questions, and I'm probably going to freak out about all of this at some point, but yes. Whatever this is between us, I want to explore it. His answering smile was radiant. Hand in hand, we rejoined his family in the living room, where knowing smiles and warm looks greeted us. Even Daniel managed a weak wolf whistle from his position on the couch. Well, said Alaric, his eyes twinkling with paternal approval, it seems the alliance between our families enters a new chapter. A stronger one, Celine added, her gaze moving meaningfully between Ethan and me. One written in both blood and heart. As morning sunlight streamed through the windows, turning ordinary dust motes into dancing golden specks, I felt a profound sense of rightness settle over me. The path ahead would not be easy. There were hunters to contend with, magic to master, a thesis that would need serious revision. But for the first time since my grandmother's death, I felt truly connected to my past, to my heritage, to these remarkable people who were now impossibly becoming my family. Ethan's hand tightened around mine, as if sensing my thoughts. Welcome home, Eliza Ellis, he said quietly. And I was home. Not just in this small mountain town, but in my own skin, in the legacy my grandmother had preserved for me, and in the golden eyes of the werewolf who had recognized me even before I recognized myself. No longer the outsider looking in. I had found my place in a world where magic and myth walked hand in hand beneath the light of the full moon.